gotta do is stay out the way. You know, come a day.
Are you?
I'd just like to say welcome to the first DRI Public Engagement event. Thank you, looks like we had a great turnout. I had a hard time finding a parking spot. That's good. BFJ Planning is going to lead us through a little presentation, and then we have kind of like a workshop type setup here tonight.
Just as Mike said, thank you all for coming, and we're really happy to see the turnout. And this is the community's opportunity to, voice what it is that you think your vision is for the village, what you'd like to see, what changes, what improvements. So thank you all for making the time to be here and to make your voice be heard. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Leanne and Mike. Once again, I'm just going to echo what we've already heard. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's really wonderful to see essentially a full room. We have seats down front if anybody wants to come. This is not church, so you're welcome to that. I'm Susan Pavati with VOO Planning. We're heading up the consultant team. You'll hear a little bit more about us in a few minutes. Really what tonight is about is introducing this project. We're thrilled to be kicking off with the public. You may have seen a couple of us around town in the last month or so, but this is really our first opportunity to meet everybody in one place, in one event, so we're very excited about that. We're going to give you a little bit of the background of this project, what's it all about, how's it going to work, what's the process. We know there's been some questions, and we want to make sure that everybody, I think, is starting from the same place and understands what the next 6 to 7 months is going to look like. And then we're going to talk a little bit about projects, the DRI projects. It seems like it might be early maybe to start talking about them, but we feel like no time is like the present. So we have some ideas that we'll talk about around the room, and we really want to hear from you. Nothing is set in stone. These are all preliminary concepts, very early ideas, but really meant to get the conversation started. So and then at the end of the night, we'll do a very brief report back about kind of what we all heard around the room and the stations and what we talked about. So just to give you a sense of who from the village and the county are involved in this project, we do have a group of 15 people on the steering committee, the local planning committee, including our co-chairs Leanne Tenney and Mike Barata, representing both the village and the county. Everybody else on this committee is really a pretty cross-cutting, broad group of people representing your neighbors, your nonprofit folks, people from local businesses, the local business community, historic preservation, really a wide range of interests here in the village. And if everybody who's on the local planning committee could just raise their hands quickly, you get a sense of who they are. Great. And we're going to be meeting with them basically every month for the next 6 months or so. So you'll be seeing them and us a lot. On the sort of consultant side of things, the people from the state who are leading this effort are the Department of State, the Department of Homes and Community Renewal, and Economic State Development. And I know Julie Sweet from Department of State is here. Anybody else from the state here tonight? Not yet? Great. They are working very closely with us and with the committee, helping us go through this project and understanding what the needs are, what we need to do going forward, how we can all work together to engage this revitalization effort. From our team, BFJ Planning, again, I'm Susan Favati, I have Simon Cates and Ari Branchini. And we also have with us tonight someone else on our team, Randy Negrelli from RES Group, and they are looking much more closely at the housing market analysis. And they're also going to be looking a little bit at the role that arts might play in economic development. Our role as consultants to the state and on behalf of the village is really to help bring up the project ideas, bring them from the community, so it's our job to get you out and to hear from you and to try to get you talking about your ideas. It's also our job to use our professional experience to vet those projects, to come up with perhaps some of our own. And it's also finally our job to make sure that the projects that are recommended for funding by the state are viable projects, are effective projects, and appropriate for state funding. So it's really a very important role that we hope to work very closely with you all on. So what is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, the DRI? I hope you all know, everybody we talk to, whenever we see people in the village, knows about the $10 million. The state has invested $100 million in each of the 10 regional economic development councils. Southern Tiers is your region, and you were the winner this time around. We were happy to work in Southern Tier last round too. We were up in Watkins Glen, so we have a little bit of a sense of the region. We're happy that you guys are a little bit closer to us geographically. So it's the point of it really is to identify, to create a strategic plan that identifies specific projects that will help the village revitalize its downtown. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in terms of the types of projects, what can and cannot be funded. It's very important to understand that. In terms of the overall strategy, it really begins with public participation. You'll hear that a lot tonight, you'll hear it throughout the process. It's really important for us to hear from you, the community and the stakeholders, get a sense of what your needs are, what your issues are, what your concerns are, and what you would like to see here. The focus here is primarily on capital physical projects. It's a good way to see if economic development is happening. You know, it's a good way to see that implementation is proceeding. So that is the state's preference, is on physical projects. It can be publicly funded projects, infrastructure, parks, sidewalk improvements, landscaping, streetscaping, all those things. It can also be privately funded projects, new housing development, new business development, a whole range of things. It doesn't mean that non-physical projects can't be funded, and there are those projects. Branding and marketing can be a project that's funded. There are fund programs or grant and matching programs that can be used for things like facade improvements, business expansion, things like that. So it is a mix of sort of physical and non-physical projects, but emphasis on the physical. Projects that can leverage additional funding are really favored. So what do we mean by that? We mean that a project can be using multiple sources of funding. Maybe they already have a grant from another state agency that they're bringing to the table. Maybe they have other private investment they've already secured and that they're bringing that to the table. So that you can basically make that DRI money grow and be more effective as a whole. And the other big piece is preference for projects that can spur growth beyond themselves. So a project on a particular site might be great in and of itself, but then it's also spurring everything that's happening within a half a block or so. Those are great projects. So we really want to make sure that these can kickstart development as a whole, economic development as a whole. These, and I'm not going to read these, but these are the state's fundamental goals that the state has established. You also will have your targeted goals, and we have sort of a rough sense of them tonight that we'll go through. We can always change them, but we've kind of taken a first crack at identifying 6 goals, and they're around the room. But in terms of the state's vision for the program, it's really about these items, and if I had to sum them up, it would be about activity and people in the downtown, right? It's making downtown a place where people want to be and want to come and want to do business. It's creating more public spaces for people to gather, having arts and cultural events. It's attracting new businesses and other new investment. It's bringing people downtown to live as well through any kind of a combination of housing opportunities. It's about growing the property tax base. It's a big one. And it's really about, sort of more broadly, the downtown amenities that people really want to see when they want to live and work in downtown Owego. So when we think about creating the DRI plan, it starts with sort of 3 main tenets. The first is the downtown vision, and we have a vision statement that was at the front of the room when you first came in. Again, our first take at crafting a statement, it's based on the village's application for the DRI, but it's meant to be the guiding policy framework of the plan. It's a statement of, hopefully a bold, aspirational statement about what downtown Owego wants to be. Obviously where it sees itself today, but really where it sees itself going in the next 5 to 10 years. That's really setting the ground for everything else that follows. The next piece is the goals and strategies of the plan. We have identified, as I said, 6 draft goals, and within those goals, there'll be various strategies. And as you can tell, we're getting from general to specific here. The strategies are going to be a little bit more specific about ways to reach those goals. And then the last piece is, I think what the fun part for us is, how do you spend the money? The projects. We're going to come up with between probably $12 and $15 million of projects. The guidance is to come up with more than the $10 million so that you have a little bit of flexibility, so the state can kind of choose a little bit. So you know, it's really a great opportunity. It's a bit of the sky's the limit, and then, you know, tonight especially, and then we'll kind of talk you down a little bit into reality. It's really up to us to help the village shape those projects into reality, basically. So that's the end game, and within those projects, there'll be implementation metrics, there'll be partners identified. It's very specific as to time frame, the total amount of money, what other funding is being brought to the table, you know, as much detail as possible to make sure that that project is, you know, real and is viable and it will happen. So in terms of what's in the DRI boundary, in case you can see, everything in yellow. It's a big part of the village, it's not all of the village. So it includes, you know, what everybody would think of as kind of your core downtown, as well as really all up North Avenue. It includes the park, fairgrounds, and, you know, some other key neighborhoods, you know, in and around the downtown. On the south side of the river, we just want to make sure that we're including both sides. It includes, you know, a pretty good chunk of land, and so this is a big gateway to the village from people arriving, particularly obviously by car. And so it's really important that that be brought into the downtown and have a good connection with the downtown. This boundary is not set in stone, I will say. Any project that is identified as a DRI project needs to be in the boundary. So the LPC has the ability to change the boundary as we go through the process. It's somewhat flexible. It's really up to you as a local community on what you think is appropriate and the projects that are kind of being brought to bear. So I'm going to turn it over to Simon to give you a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of what goes into the DRI.
Great, thank you, Susan. So I'm going to talk about some of the details of what's going to come out of this process and what goes into the plan itself. So what the plan is going to be, it's going to be a physical document. Right? We're going to sort of produce this. It's going to have you know, roughly these sections. The downtown profile and assessment is like your inventory and analysis. What are the existing conditions that we need to understand as a planner, as a consultant, in order to help us develop and work with you to develop project ideas. So this is going to be physical conditions. What are the areas that you know, need improved streetscapes, or what are the building conditions in different areas? But also market, the economy, real estate, retail markets, different issues like that. They're going to help us understand what types of businesses are needed and what are the key uses in the downtown. Susan talked about the vision, goals, and strategies. That's going to be a way for us to make sure that the projects are relating back to the key priorities that we hear from you throughout the process. And we're going to talk about an implementation strategy to make sure that these projects aren't pie in the sky, that there is someone on the ground who's going to be able to implement them. We're going to describe the public involvement process that we're kicking off here tonight. And then the last two items are about the projects. And this is really the core of the plan. As Susan said, it's the fun part. It's the fun part for us. It's the fun part for you as well. And so that's what we're really going to spend most of our time on as sort of your consultant, but also in public meetings like this. So first, we need to set some ground rules, right? We need to make sure we understand what can be funded and also what can't be funded. So first of all, what's eligible? Public and private sort of building, construction, or rehabilitation projects, right? You know, again, these could be, you know, physical infrastructure, it could be a real estate development, but we really want to focus primarily, not entirely, but primarily on physical capital projects. Legislative and regulatory changes, you can update your zoning code. That's one way that you can use DRI funds. A branding and marketing campaign. What's a way that the village can attract more businesses into the downtown? How can we create a more cohesive sort of signage program so that when you enter Owego, you have a feel, you know where you are. And a grant or a loan program, a sort of matching program for small business expansion, for a sort of residential rehabilitation program. We could also do things like that. What's not eligible? This is really important to sort of get this out on the table so that as we're having conversations, we know, you know, that might be a great idea, but it's not right for this type of program, right? So planning activities. This is a good one, right? We're doing some planning now, but you don't want to put into your DRI plan, more planning, right? So one of the messages that we had for the local planning committee when we met a couple of weeks ago is get as much out of us as you can over the course of the next 6 or 7 months. That's why we're here. But the plan itself is not going to spend money on more planning activities. Operation and maintenance, we need to understand if the funds are going towards a specific project that a private operator or the village has the capacity to continue to operate and maintain a project, but the DRI funds are not going to go towards that. Pre-award costs, if somebody has spent money already on a project, they can't get reimbursed before the plan is done. Property acquisition cannot be funded by the DRI program. However, if there is a private project that requires acquisition of property, that can proceed, right? The sort of project sponsor can buy a property with their own funds, use DRI money to renovate a building, for example. But the purchase price has to be reasonable, right? It has to be near an appraised fair market value, so that DRI money isn't being used to sort of give someone a property owner a windfall. Training and program expenses can't be used, and sort of an existing program that's already funded can't be funded with DRI money. The one other thing I'll point out here, this note on the bottom, there may be some really good projects that have community support that the village wants to see proceed, but aren't right for the DRI program for many different reasons. It might be that a project isn't quite ready. Maybe it needs some more planning work before it can be implemented, but it's sort of a better project for some time in the future. We may want to identify projects like that in your DRI plan, because it could give you a better chance to get additional funding in the future. It shows that there is some community support for a project idea, even if it can't necessarily be funded right now. So what are the criteria? These are the criteria that we are going to be discussing with the local planning committee. How are we deciding which projects are sort of more impactful and which ones maybe aren't quite right? So does a project align with both the state goals that Susan talked about and the local goals that we're going to continue to develop with you, and Ari's going to talk a little bit more about those in a moment. Is the project ready, right? If a project isn't quite ready to proceed, if it's something that's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years, then it's not right for this program, even if it might be a great project. We want to make sure that these are things that are really ready to be implemented in the next couple of years. Is the project likely to have a catalytic effect? What we mean by that is it going to spur additional investment in the downtown? We want to look at projects that are going to bring in additional private investment, that are going to get other people to spend money, to move downtown, and have other benefits. The next one, co-benefits. Is it going to have secondary benefits in addition to what is happening on its own site, right? It could be historic preservation, it could be environmental benefits, it could be expanding the tax base, other impacts that are beyond what the specific project might do. And cost effectiveness. This is an important one for the state. The state wants to make sure that these funds are being used efficiently. It's also important for the community, right? You have a limited allocation of money. $10 million, I said this with the committee the other day, would be a lot of money in my pocket. It's not a lot of money when you're talking about infrastructure improvements and building construction. So we want to make sure that we're stretching this money as far as we can. So just a little bit about the overall process. We sort of started with this item up here, selection of DRI communities. There's been a little bit of an ongoing process already where the village submitted an application to the state, they interviewed, they demonstrated that you all are sort of primed for this type of investment to have a big impact. So that's why we're all here today. The second item, preparation of the strategic investment plan, is what we're doing now, right? We're going to produce this document. It's going to identify a list of projects. As Susan said, it might have more than $10 million. It might be more like $12 or $15 million. And we're going to finish that document by the end of March 2019. That date is not getting extended, right? So we've got a drop dead deadline. We're going to finish this plan, and then implementation is going to continue in the summer of next year. The state is going to kind of select a final list of projects. They're going to cull that list down to 10 million. and funds will start to be distributed sort of towards the end of 2019. And again, most of these projects should be ready to go. So once we get to that point next year, you might start to see some things happening. So that in a way, there's a little bit of a process that we're going to go through now to make sure that we've got the right projects identified. But money's not going to start getting distributed next month, right? It's going to take a little bit of time. But that in a way it's a protection for you all to make sure that the community has an opportunity to weigh in, and that the projects that are in the plan are ones that are going to have a legitimate impact on your downtown. Now, so within that second item, that investment plan that we're working on now, this gives you a sense of where we are now in the process and where we're going to be going from here. So we're just here, right, October 24th, early on in this overall process. We're identifying the vision, goals, and strategies. We're talking about some preliminary project ideas. Back in our office, we're starting to work on that downtown profile and assessment. What are the existing conditions that we need to identify? There's going to be sort of robust public outreach that Ari's going to talk about in a moment. But really, again, the core here is the project profiles, right? That's the meat of the plan. What are these projects going to be? That's where we're going to spend most of our time. That's what we're going to start talking about tonight on these very preliminary ideas. But we're excited to hear from you what you like, but more importantly, what's missing. Are there any other ideas that we haven't heard of yet? Ari's going to talk about this open call for projects so that we can hear as many private sort of ideas about private projects as we can, so that we can kind of grow the list that you see around the room. And as I said, we'll have another public workshop probably in January, early in 2019, to talk about what some of these ideas are, how they've developed over time, and then there'll be a final public workshop in February or March. And again, March 31st is when we're going to be done with the plan, and then we'll sort of move on to the implementation phase. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Ari to talk a little bit more about developing the vision for downtown Owego.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so Simon and Susan have talked a little bit about the background of the DRI program, how the whole process works from that side, and now we're going to sort of relate it back to Owego a little bit more specifically, starting with the vision, which is on the board when you first walk in. With the full map of projects that we have so far. So as you can see here, the downtown vision is adapted from the village's application for the DRI grant. So we have taken some of the ideas that were in the application and that were in some of the initial meetings and pop-up events that we've had in the community, and adapted that to sort of identify some of the village's greatest assets, talk about how that can be leveraged towards a vision for the entire process. So as Susan outlined initially, the vision is sort of this overarching vision that we have for the entire project, and then that will be sort of come through the goals and then eventually through the project. So in the vision, we mentioned the access to the Susquehanna River, very important here in Owego. We recognize that. The historic charm of the village, arts, the art scene that exists here, enhancing some of the walkability and some of the existing assets that you have in the village, and leveraging that to improve the opportunities for the village's future and ensure that this sort of sets the stage for ongoing revitalization of Owego. And so below the vision, we have a series of goals, and the stations that we have tonight are actually set up around the goals. So the goals are listed here in full. At each station, we've sort of organized them according to the highlighted words that you have here. So the first goal, we recognize the importance of the river, the importance of some of the natural resources here in the village, recognizing that we might have projects related specifically to outdoor recreation and access to natural resources. The second goal we have here is around arts and culture, recognizing some of the existing art scene that you have in Owego, some of the existing opportunities, leveraging that, again, as a goal for the future. The third goal in terms of quality of life, looking at community facilities, streetscapes, aesthetics, so projects that have to do with aesthetics, community facilities, streetscapes, improvements to the public realm, that sort of thing will be under the third goal of quality of life enhancement. The fourth goal has to do with infrastructure. So again, we recognize that flooding has been a major issue in Owego. We know that's something that this plan sort of must address as well. And looking at projects to improve existing infrastructure here in the village and make improvements that might mitigate the effects of flooding in the future. The fifth goal, bolstering economic development. So supporting existing small businesses, attracting entrepreneurs who might want to relocate here in the future, and linking Owego residents to local jobs. There are some major job centers in the area, and we know that access to those jobs is critical. And the sixth goal is strengthening the existing neighborhoods. So recognizing that there are many neighborhoods here in Owego where there are residents who, and there could potentially be new residents moving into the village as well, and ensuring that housing is available for those who live here and potentially new people who might be attracted to the village in the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the community engagement process, ways to get involved with the DRI. So as Susan mentioned, we have a local planning committee. We're meeting once a month for the next 6 months or so. These meetings are open to the public. The public engagement events, this is the first of 3 public workshops that we'll be having through the process. The next one will be in December or January, so date to be determined. And we've had pop-up events already. This is sort of an opportunity to piggyback on existing events that are happening around the village and get out to members of the community who might not be able to come to an evening workshop, who might not be available. And stakeholder interviews, within the group of consultants that are working on this project, we're sort of reaching out to people in the community who have specific knowledge about various things that might be involved in the DRI plan and trying to access the resources within the community directly as well. A public survey, we will be setting up a public survey online through SurveyMonkey. Will also be made available in hard copy. We will determine the date of the public survey. We don't know exactly when it will be open yet, but when it is, it will be notified and will be available in hard copy and online. And finally, the open call for projects. So this is the next slide here. So the projects that you see around the room right now, many of them have come from initial ideas that were represented in the DRI application to the state. Others have come through initial discussions with the local planning committee and with members of the public at some of these early pop-up events that we had the first Friday at the St. Patrick's Fall Festival. So just some of our initial impressions, some of our initial discussions. We've developed this sort of basic list of projects that we have on the board tonight. Another really important component of this is hearing directly from the public on projects that might not be on the boards yet, or that could be further developed by members of the public with us. So the open call is our sort of opportunity. It's basically an RFP out to the public. We're requesting that members of the public submit a proposal of sorts through this open call. If you have an idea for a project, we'd like members of the public to fill out one of these applications. They're currently available. They're currently available online on the website. So it's at the end of the presentation, you'll see the website, and they're also available in hard copy. So this is basically an RFP for the public. To share ideas for projects that you might not see. If you're a private property owner, you might have an idea that you want to improve your existing business, you might want to expand, you might want to add apartments to the upper story of a building that you own downtown, something along those lines. If you are interested in doing a project like this, you can fill out the open call for projects. You can provide any level of detail, but we hope to get as much detail as possible from each individual submitting a project. The site control is an important component of this, but if you have an idea, we absolutely want to hear it. There are also sort of opportunities through this process to partner somebody's idea who might not have a site and somebody who has a site but might not have an idea. So as you can see, we have We'll be having office hours to discuss some of the projects that will be submitted through the DRI open call. We'll be up here on Wednesday, November 14th at the Tioga County Office Building. This is an opportunity for people who are interested in submitting a project or who have already submitted a project and want to discuss more with us about their project. We'll be there in person to answer some of your questions or to sort of help you develop and process the application. The deadline to submit questions is November 16th, and the deadline to submit projects is December 7th. So there's some time between now and December 7th, and you can ask us questions this evening, pick up applications that we have here. Again, they're available online, and they will be submitted via email or to Leanne, at Tioga County. And finally, I'm going to turn it back to Susan to talk about the maps.
Just I wanted a couple more things on the open call, just to make sure everybody understands. No idea is too big or too small. Be aspirational. Every question doesn't have to be answered by December 7th. We hope that we can get, as Ari said, as much detail as possible, but don't feel that you have to dot every I and cross every T necessarily. We will be working with everybody who submits for the open call process. If there's a project that is really intriguing and the committee is interested in pursuing that, we'll work with you very closely. And believe me, the last round we did this in Watkins-Glen, and we spent a lot of time with a couple of the people who submitted, really working with them to try to make the project more real, to make it more viable, to flesh it out, to get all the details in order, and a couple of those projects actually did end up getting funded by the state. So it's a really great process, I think, for us, for the community. It puts kind of everybody on an equal playing field. Everybody submits. It's the same application. You all have to provide the same information.